Inside Dr. Walker's sterile lab, an eerie silence reigns. Emma Larson's world has been consumed by stress and anxiety. But now she stands on the precipice of a revolutionary change. A frail man with an unsettling intensity scrutinizes her. The consensus filter could be the key to unlocking her success. But at what cost? Emma wonders as she prepares for the procedure. She lies on a cold metal table, awaiting the alteration of her mind. The air is thick with disinfectant and something metallic that makes Emma shiver. Dr. Walker's words echo in her head. You're no longer plagued by those destructive emotions. As she traded her humanity for a life of unbridled efficiency. As the consensus filter takes hold, Emma begins to realize she's not alone in her struggle. Others may still possess genuine emotion. Will Emma find a way back to herself? And will it be too late? The journey begins as she embarks on a quest for truth and authenticity. Like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The sterile white light of her office mocked Emma, its intensity matching the weight on her chest. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept well or laughed without it feeling forced. The constant barrage of stress hormones had become a familiar hum in her blood. As an executive at Larson Tech Inc., success was her only currency. But at what cost? Her family life was a series of hurried dinners and neglected birthday presents. She'd lost count of the weekends spent working instead of playing with her kids. They were growing up without their mother present, and soon she might not even recognize them. That's when she first heard about Dr. Julian Walker and his revolutionary invention, the consensus filter. It was billed as a neural implant that could suppress emotional distress from reality. The idea alone brought both dread and desperate hope to her aching heart. Emma contacted Dr. Walker discreetly, arranging an anonymous meeting at his private lab in the outskirts of the city. She arrived early, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel as she gazed up at the unassuming building. If anyone discovered her involvement, her career would be over. Inside, she was greeted by a frail, bespectacled man with a manic glint in his eye that seemed to miss nothing about her. "Emma Larson," he said, his voice steady but edged with an unsettling intensity. "I've heard a great deal about you." He ushered her into the sterile depths of his lab, where various medical contraptions stood sentinel over rows of petri dishes and stacks of files. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and something else, something metallic and sharp. "It's an honor to finally meet you," Emma replied, trying not to show how uncomfortable she felt under Dr. Walker's piercing scrutiny. "I assure you this honor is mutual," he said as he gestured toward a cold metal table in the center of the room. "You're willing to take a great leap of faith, aren't you?" Emma hesitated for a moment before nodding. She'd already come too far to turn back now. "Excellent choice," Dr. Walker said with a small, satisfied smile. "The procedure is quite simple, and you'll be back at work within a week." He handed her a consent form filled with technobabble she didn't understand. Emma skimmed it quickly, her mind racing ahead to the life that awaited her, free from stress, free from sadness, and perhaps even free from herself. "Shall we begin?" Dr. Walker asked, his eyes gleaming behind thick lenses. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm the flutter in her chest. She signed the form with shaking hands and lay back on the table, steeling herself for the change that was about to come over her. As the anesthetic took hold, Emma felt a strange sense of detachment as she watched Dr. Walker's gloved hands move with precision over her exposed skull. This was it, the beginning of her new life, a life where the relentless pressures and anxieties would be a distant memory. And then, nothingness. Dark, blissful nothingness that seemed to stretch on forever until suddenly light flooded back into her world as if she had been reborn. Emma blinked slowly, trying to clear the fog from her mind. She was lying in a recovery room somewhere, although she couldn't quite remember how she'd gotten there. The memory of signing that consent form came back to her, followed by flashes of Dr. Walker's face, his hands moving over hers. And then nothing. She pushed herself up on one elbow, taking stock of the sterile surroundings. Everything was neat and clinical, with no sign of the man who had performed the procedure on her. She felt different, lighter somehow, as if she'd shed a lifetime of burdens in an instant. But what exactly did that mean? And how would it change your life? A gentle tap at the door broke into her thoughts. "How are you feeling, Emma?" Dr. Walker's voice sounded from beyond the threshold. Emma tried to smile, but something felt off. Her lips wouldn't quite cooperate. "I'm fine," she managed, her tone sounding strange even to herself. "That's good." He entered with a tray bearing a steaming cup of tea and a plate of bland-looking crackers. "Drink this first, it'll help with the residual discomfort." Emma accepted the offering gratefully, sipping at the lukewarm liquid as he observed her closely. The flavors were dull, almost non-existent, much like everything else in her life had been lately. "Do you remember anything about the procedure?" Dr. Walker asked once she'd finished her drink. "The sensation of waking up with your thoughts and emotions filtered out?" Emma frowned, trying to recall. It was all so hazy, but then again, she hadn't exactly expected a clear memory of lying there unconscious while he worked on her brain. "No," she admitted, "but I can sense that something has changed." "Exactly." Dr. Walker beamed, his eyes shining with excitement behind the thick lenses. "The consensus filter is working as intended. You're no longer plagued by those destructive emotions that were eating away at you so mercilessly." Emma nodded slowly, a shiver running down her spine. It was true, the constant dread and anxiety seemed to have vanished overnight, but in their place, what? A dull numbness, an absence of feeling entirely. She looked up at him with sudden suspicion. "Dr. Walker," she said, her voice taking on a steely edge despite herself, "if this thing really works as you claim, why not just implant it globally? Why test it out on me first?" The scientist's expression faltered for the briefest of moments before he regained his composure. "Because we needed to be sure, Emma. The implications are too vast to rush into. But rest assured, once we're satisfied with its efficacy and safety, then, yes, I intend to make this a reality for all humanity." Emma's blood ran cold at the prospect. She couldn't imagine living in a world devoid of passion, empathy, and yet there was something undeniably appealing about the idea as well. No more constant stress, no more sleepless nights consumed by fear and self-doubt. "Will I be able to go back to work soon?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. Dr. Walker nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. We'll monitor your progress, but you should be returning to your normal life within the week." That was all Emma needed to hear. She lay back down on the cot and closed her eyes, already anticipating the ease with which she would handle any challenges that might arise at the office. With this new filter in place, success seemed inevitable. And as sleep claimed her, Emma couldn't help but wonder what other changes awaited her in a world where emotions had become an obsolete relic of the past. When she woke up 2 days later, Emma felt more herself than ever before, confident and poised, ready to take on whatever lay ahead. But it wasn't until she caught a glimpse of her reflection that she noticed something strange. Her eyes seemed flat, almost lifeless. And when she tried to smile again, the expression felt forced and unnatural. Perhaps it was just the lingering effects of the anesthesia, Emma told herself as she quickly dressed in the clothes provided by Dr. Walker's assistants. But there was a growing unease inside her that refused to be ignored, a sense that something crucial was missing from her new existence, even if she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. As she made her way out of the lab and back into the world, Emma couldn't help but wonder just how much of herself had been lost in exchange for this supposedly perfect life, and whether it would be worth the price in the end. Over the following weeks, Emma found herself thriving under the influence of the consensus filter. Her work performance skyrocketed as she tackled complex projects with renewed focus and precision. Colleagues marveled at her transformation, and before long, she was being courted by some of the industry's most prominent firms. At a high-profile conference in Tokyo, Emma delivered a groundbreaking presentation on predictive analytics that earned her rave reviews. The applause from her peers felt almost like a drug, and for the first time since her mother's passing, Emma allowed herself to bask in the glow of success without being overwhelmed by emotion. The filter had indeed changed her life. It had enabled her to excel professionally while suppressing the personal turmoil that once threatened to derail her ambitions. But as she sat alone in her hotel room later that night, scrolling through congratulatory messages on her phone, Emma couldn't shake off a growing sense of disconnection from those around her. She felt like an outsider looking in, observing human interactions without truly participating. Her colleagues and friends seemed to be experiencing genuine joy, but it was all so different now. The laughter sounded forced, the hugs lacked warmth, and even sexual encounters felt hollow and mechanical. It was as if she had become a highly effective robot, capable of mimicking human behavior but devoid of any real emotional depth or connection. Encounters had become mechanical exercises devoid of passion or intimacy. Rachel had been Emma's rock throughout her corporate climb, but their friendship had taken a hit since the implant procedure. Emma couldn't help noticing how Rachel looked at her differently. The concern in her eyes, the slightly tilted head, as if trying to understand this new person who wore her old friend's face like a mask. They still met for dinner occasionally, but the conversations felt stilted and superficial. Emma would talk about her projects or industry trends with practiced ease, while Rachel would recount stories from her own life with an emotional depth that seemed out of reach for Emma now. One evening, as they parted ways outside a crowded restaurant, Rachel placed a hand on Emma's arm. "Hey, is everything okay? You seem distant lately." Emma forced a smile and shrugged it off. "Just tired, I guess. The pace has been brutal since the presentation in Tokyo." Rachel frowned but didn't press further. As she walked away, Emma felt a pang of guilt for not being more forthcoming. She hated that her new emotional state was driving a wedge between them, but what could she do? The filter had become such an integral part of her existence that even contemplating life without it seemed unimaginable. And yet, the faintest whisper persisted at the back of her mind, the nagging suspicion that something vital had been sacrificed in exchange for this newfound success and control. Emma's gaze drifted out the hotel window as Tokyo's neon-lit skyscrapers pierced the night sky. She couldn't shake off the feeling that she was just a ghost, floating through life without any real connection to it. Her success, the promotions, the accolades, felt hollow now. How could she truly celebrate when every joy seemed tinged with emptiness? A knock on the door jolted her back to reality. Rachel stood in the hallway, concern etched across her face. "Hey, I was worried when you didn't answer your phone. Everything okay?" Emma offered a feeble smile and beckoned her inside. "I'm fine," she lied, trying to mask the unease that had been growing within her. As they sat on the edge of the bed, Rachel's eyes searched Emma's face, as if trying to pierce through the filter's veil. "You're not okay, Em. I can see it. You used to talk about your projects with such enthusiasm. Now you seem almost numb to it all." Emma shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of anger at the implication that she was somehow defective. "I'm just tired," she repeated, trying to sound convincing. Rachel sighed and reached out, her hand hovering above Emma's before dropping back to her lap. "Maybe it's more than exhaustion, though. You've changed since getting the implant. It's like you're no longer there." Emma recoiled from Rachel's words as if they were a physical blow. She wanted to deny them, to lash out and insist that everything was fine, but the doubt within her had grown too strong. Was it really just her imagination? Could she truly be unaware of these changes in herself? Rachel continued, her voice softer but no less insistent. "I miss my friend Emma. I miss the way we could share our deepest thoughts without fear or judgment. Can you tell me what's going on inside your head right now? What are you feeling?" Emma's chest tightened as she struggled to put words to this strange new sense of detachment and disconnection. She'd been so focused on excelling at work, maintaining the polished facade that Dr. Walker had promised would bring her peace, but at what cost? "I don't know," Emma admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I'm living in someone else's life, a life I was supposed to lead but never really wanted." Rachel's eyes welled up with tears as she wrapped her arms around Emma in a fierce embrace. "That's what I've been trying to tell you," she whispered back, but even I didn't realize how much we'd lost until now." As they held each other, the weight of their shared understanding seemed to crack open something deep within Emma, a desire not just for a life without the consensus filter, but for genuine human connection. The thought sent a shiver down her spine and filled her with a strange yet exhilarating sense of hope. "What if," she began hesitantly, "what if we could find others like us? People who've resisted the filter or somehow managed to keep their emotions alive." Rachel looked at her with wide eyes, the question hanging in the air between them like a challenge and an invitation. Together, they knew exactly what steps needed to be taken next. In that moment, as Tokyo's city lights pulsed outside their hotel window, Emma realized she was ready to take back control over her own life, no matter how dangerous or uncertain the path ahead might seem. And with Rachel by her side, she felt a strength and purpose growing within her, a resolve to reclaim the essence of humanity that had been hidden away for far too long. The question now was, would they be able to evade Dr. Walker's surveillance long enough to find the resistance movement rumored to exist in secret? And if so, what would happen when Emma finally confronted the man who'd altered her destiny forever? The world seemed poised on the brink of chaos as the filter began to unravel, and Emma knew that she stood at the forefront of a revolution, a battle for hearts and minds that would decide humanity's future. The night air was crisp as Emma and Rachel emerged from their hotel, clad in nondescript clothing and carrying minimal belongings. With Dr. Walker's agents and corporate security potentially watching every move they made, discretion was paramount. They navigated Tokyo's neon-lit streets with caution, sticking to shadows and side alleys. "This is insane," Rachel whispered, her eyes darting around nervously as they walked. "What if we get caught? What if Dr. Walker—" "Shh," Emma interrupted, placing a hand on her friend's arm. "We have each other now, and there are people out there who understand exactly what we're going through." Rachel nodded, but it was clear the doubts still lingered. Emma understood them all too well. She felt them gnawing at her own confidence as they made their way toward the rendezvous point. As instructed, they entered a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city, bypassing a set of locked doors to find themselves in a dimly lit corridor lined with closed rooms. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something primal and untamed. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead, tall and imposing but not threatening. His eyes were sunken, his skin weathered and dark, giving him an almost otherworldly appearance. "Welcome," he said in a low, gravelly voice. "We've been expecting you." With that, Emma and Rachel were led into one of the rooms where several individuals sat cross-legged on cushions, men and women alike, all sharing a certain intensity in their gazes. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken understanding. These were people who had resisted the filter, who knew its dark secrets firsthand. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine as she took a seat among them. They began to share their stories of fear and desperation, of pain and resilience, and Emma listened in rapt attention, recognizing herself in every word. This was what she'd been searching for, a connection to the raw, beating heart of humanity. But even as hope blossomed within her, doubt still lingered. What about Dr. Walker's promises of a utopia free from suffering? Was it possible that the filter could be reformed, repurposed? And what role would Emma play in this unfolding drama, protagonist or pawn? The questions swirled in her mind as the group continued to share their experiences, a tapestry of stories woven together by pain and defiance. And though there was no easy answer, Emma knew that she had made the right decision to confront the darkness head-on, even if it meant risking everything. For at its core, this wasn't about Dr. Walker's invention. It was about the human spirit itself, the capacity for joy, for sorrow, for connection and separation, the very essence of what made us who we were. And Emma had no intention of letting that slip away again. As she gazed out into the room filled with strangers turned kin, Emma felt a spark of determination ignite within her, a fire fueled by hope and resolve. For the first time in months, a genuine smile flickered across her lips. one born, not from suppression, but true feeling, as Emma steeled herself for the journey that awaited. A path forged by heartache and hardship, leading toward an unknown horizon where humanity might finally rediscover its soul. The underground hideout was a labyrinth of cramped corridors and dimly lit chambers, pulsing with the murmur of conspirators plotting their next move against Dr. Walker's consensus filter regime. Emma navigated this subterranean world with growing confidence, her eyes now accustomed to the shadows that once threatened to consume her. As she followed Rachel through a narrow stairwell, the sounds of clandestine whispers and rustling papers faded into the background. Their destination was a secluded area, cordoned off by a heavy metal door adorned with a simple, hand-drawn skull, a warning to those who dared enter this forbidden realm. Rachel glanced back at Emma, her expression both serious and reassuring. "This is it," she said softly. "The heart of our resistance." Emma's heart pounded as Rachel pushed the door open, revealing an expansive space lit by flickering candles set within hollowed-out books. The air was thick with smoke from hand-rolled cigarettes, their sweet aroma a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere Emma had endured under the filter. Seated around a large wooden table were several individuals, men and women of varying ages and appearances, all sharing a fierce determination in their eyes. Some sported bruises or scars, evidence of their defiance against Walker's agents. At the center of this gathering stood an imposing figure, his hair gray and wild, his face etched with lines that spoke of countless battles fought. "This is Akira," Rachel introduced him, "our leader. He'll tell you our story." Akira gazed at Emma for a long moment before speaking in a low, gravelly voice. "We were once like you, a fragmented society yearning for peace and unity. But when Walker unveiled his miracle cure, we saw the writing on the wall." His eyes locked onto hers with an unnerving intensity. The cost of that so-called salvation was too high. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Akira continued to describe their ordeal, the brutal suppression of dissent by government forces armed with Walker's filter technology. Stories of loved ones torn apart, families destroyed, all silenced under the pretense of a utopian future. As she listened, Emma couldn't help but think about her own journey from corporate success to emotional numbness and back again. She felt a pang of guilt for having benefited from Walker's invention at all, even if it was initially voluntary. These rebels had fought against the system without such luxuries, true heroes who refused to surrender their humanity. "So what do we do now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she met Akira's piercing gaze once more. Akira leaned forward, his eyes glinting with purpose. "We dismantle Walker's empire piece by piece, and you," he gestured toward Emma, "will be our weapon against him." Emma felt the weight of that responsibility settle upon her shoulders like a mantle forged from the very essence of rebellion. It was a daunting task, but one she knew she had to undertake, the only way to reclaim her own soul and perhaps save others from the same fate. Without the consensus filter's numbing influence, Emma was finally able to process the full extent of her experiences, a rollercoaster ride of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her at times. Yet amidst this turmoil, she found a resilience within herself, one born from the ashes of her former life. As the night wore on and the rebels' stories unfolded, Emma realized that their struggle against Dr. Walker was not just about overthrowing an oppressive regime, but about reclaiming the very fabric of humanity. It was about acknowledging pain as a part of life, embracing the beauty and darkness alike, and finding strength in vulnerability. By dawn's early light, Emma had made her decision, the path forward clear as daybreak itself. She would join this brave band of warriors, risking everything to expose Walker's charade and set humanity free from its emotional shackles. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but for the first time in months, she felt truly alive, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her own making. As Rachel led Emma back through the labyrinthine corridors toward the secret entrance, a faint melody drifted on the wind, haunting yet hopeful. It was a song of defiance and longing, sung by those who refuse to be silenced, the very embodiment of the human spirit, fighting for its right to exist in all its messy, beautiful glory. And Emma knew that she would march alongside these rebels, armed with nothing but her own heartbeats and determination, until Walker's regime crumbled beneath their unyielding resolve. The future awaited, shrouded in uncertainty, but for Emma, it had never looked brighter. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the price of true freedom would be worth every sacrifice. And as she emerged into the early morning light, her spirit ignited by a fire that could never be extinguished, Emma Larson stepped forth into a new world, a woman reborn in the crucible of rebellion and the unyielding power of the human soul. Rachel guided Emma through the narrow, dimly lit corridors that wound beneath Tokyo's bustling streets, each step carrying them further from the suffocating embrace of Walker's filter. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something acrid, perhaps a warning against discovery. Every fiber of her being hummed with anticipation as they neared their destination, a secret haven for those who refuse to surrender to emotional numbness. As they approached a rusted metal door, Rachel paused, her eyes searching Emma's face. "You're sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Was Emma prepared to confront the consequences of her choices? Her heart raced with a mix of trepidation and exhilaration as she nodded resolutely. Rachel pushed open the door, revealing a cavernous space that seemed to pulse with life itself. People of all ages mingled about, their faces alight with expressions so vivid they almost appeared painted on. Laughter and shouts of joy mingled with somber tones of grief and indignation, a cacophony that echoed the richness of authentic human emotion. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she took it all in, the vibrant tapestry of humanity unfolding before her eyes. Her throat as she took it all in, the vibrant colors, the fervent exchanges of words and gestures, the sheer presence of life without its filters. Rachel led her deeper into the crowd, weaving a path through the throng until they reached a makeshift stage at the far end of the room. There, a young man with wild curls and eyes ablaze with passion stood speaking to an audience enraptured by his words. As he spoke, Emma felt something stir within her, a deep wellspring of emotion long suppressed, now threatening to overflow. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she listened to his tale of resistance against Walker's tyranny. It was raw and unapologetic, exactly what she'd been craving since her own descent into emotional detachment. Rachel nudged her forward, urging Emma to join the crowd on stage. As she hesitantly took a step up onto the platform, a wave of energy surged through her, a collective force that spoke directly to her soul. She felt seen and heard for the first time in months, validated as a human being worthy of experiencing life's full spectrum of emotion. The young man who had been speaking turned to Emma with a welcoming smile. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying across the room like a benediction. "You have taken your first steps toward reclaiming what Walker tried to steal from us all." Emma's gaze met those around her, faces etched by hardship, yet shining with resilience and hope. She felt her own heart swell within her chest, yearning to be part of this community that embraced the messy beauty of humanity in all its forms. In that moment, Emma knew she was home, not just among these rebels, but within herself as well. Walker's filter had been a temporary prison now. She stood on the precipice of liberation. The journey ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but for the first time in years, Emma felt truly alive, a woman ready to face whatever challenges lay before her, armed with nothing but her own heartbeats and the unyielding spirit of those who refused to be silenced. As the crowd erupted into applause, Emma Larson raised her hands to the sky, a gesture of gratitude and defiance, as she embarked on a path that would change the course of her life and perhaps the future of humanity forever. The rebels' sanctuary buzzed with activity as Emma settled into a new life among them. Rachel took her under her wing, showing her around their makeshift home, a labyrinth of converted warehouses and underground tunnels that had become a beacon for those seeking authenticity in a world where emotions were taboo. Emma's days blended together in a tapestry of meetings, training sessions, and clandestine operations against Walker's regime. She learned to navigate the city's hidden infrastructure with ease, slipping from shadows to shadows as she helped distribute anti-filter propaganda or infiltrate high-security facilities to steal vital information. But amidst the chaos of their resistance, Emma found herself drawn to moments of stillness, the quiet conversations, and shared laughter that forged bonds between them, a respite from the constant vigilance required in their fight against oppression. In these fleeting instants, Emma felt a sense of belonging she had never known before, her heart beating as one with those around her. Over steaming bowls of ramen in a back-alley kitchen, the whispered laughter during late-night card games, and the unspoken understanding that passed between her fellow rebels as they faced another day under Walker's iron fist. These fleeting glimpses of genuine connection filled her with an ache she couldn't quite name. One evening, after a particularly grueling mission, Emma found herself sitting alone in the sanctuary's library room filled to bursting with books and artifacts salvaged from pre-filter society. As she flipped through the pages of an ancient novel, she felt a strange sensation like the words were speaking directly to her soul. "I've been waiting for you," she said softly. "My name is Akira. I sense you're struggling to reconcile your past life with this new reality." Emma's gaze dropped to her hands, which were still stained with the ink of Walker's lies, the same lies that had nearly consumed her very essence. Akira sat beside her, placing a gentle hand on Emma's knee. "We all carry the scars of our pasts here," she said gently. "But in this place we're free to heal, to rediscover the depths of our own humanity." Emma looked up, her eyes meeting Akira's with a glimmer of hope. It was as if the woman's words had unlocked a door within her, allowing the memories of her former life to flood back in all their intensity. Tears pricked at the corners of Emma's eyes as she recalled the warmth of Rachel's embrace, the way laughter used to bubble up from deep within her chest, and the sense of purpose that had driven her before the filter took hold. She realized with a jolt of realization that she hadn't truly felt alive in years, hadn't allowed herself to experience the full spectrum of human emotion since becoming Walker's unwitting test subject. Akira squeezed Emma's hand reassuringly as the young woman's tears began to flow freely down her cheeks. "You're not alone," Akira whispered, as if sensing the depth of Emma's grief and longing. "We're all here for you, for each other, because we know that true strength lies not in suppressing our pain, but in embracing it fully." Emma drew a shuddering breath, feeling the weight of her past begin to lift from her shoulders like a shroud being torn away. As she sat there amidst the remnants of pre-filter society, surrounded by people who understood the cost of living without heartache and joy, Emma knew that she had found her true home among those who dared to feel. And with that knowledge came a resolve, a determination to fight for this fragile oasis in the midst of Walker's oppressive regime. For Emma Larson had come too far to turn back now, and she would not rest until every last vestige of Walker's filter was eradicated, leaving behind only the raw beauty and complexity of humanity in all its messy glory. The night air clung to Emma's skin as she left the sheltered confines of the underground hideout, Rachel and Akira by her side. The city sprawled before them like a concrete beast, its neon lights casting an artificial glow over the desolate streets. They moved with purpose, their footsteps echoing off the buildings. "What's the plan, then?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper as they navigated through back alleys and narrow passageways. Rachel consulted the map etched on the underside of her wrist, her eyes scanning the grid-like pattern for their destination. "We've got about 20 minutes before Walker's agents start patrolling again," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We need to make it to the safe house in Shibuya district and pick up our contact there." Akira nodded, his gaze sweeping the surrounding area with a practiced ease that suggested this was far from their first clandestine operation. As they quickened their pace, Emma's mind raced ahead of them, planning contingencies, anticipating Walker's next move. She couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, that Dr. Walker would stop at nothing to reclaim her as his perfect specimen and ensure the continuation of his filtered utopia. They finally arrived at a nondescript doorway concealed behind a stack of crates, their contact the enigmatic Kaito waiting for them with an unreadable expression on his face. He ushered them inside without a word, leading them down a dimly lit stairwell to a subterranean room filled with rows of computer terminals and hunched figures typing furiously at keyboards. "Welcome to the Resistance," Kaito said, handing each of them a data stick containing crucial information about Walker's research facility. "You'll need this if you plan on dismantling his precious filter." Emma glanced around the room, her heart swelling with gratitude for these strangers who had taken up arms against the regime. But even as she embraced their cause, a part of her wondered if she truly belonged here among these warriors and hackers, so far removed from her own world of corporate boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. "What's our next move?" Rachel asked, breaking into Emma's reverie. Kaito handed her a set of encrypted communications devices. "You'll be in contact with our field operatives. We've pinpointed Walker's research facility, a heavily fortified compound on the outskirts of Tokyo." He paused, studying their faces for any sign of doubt or hesitation. "It won't be easy to infiltrate, but if anyone can do it, I believe you three can." Emma nodded resolutely, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She knew that this was her chance to reclaim not only her own humanity, but also the future she'd once envisioned. A world where people could truly live, with all their flaws and virtues intact. "We're ready," Emma declared, a fierce determination burning within her. "Let's take down Walker and his damned filter." As they prepared to embark on this perilous mission, Emma felt an odd sense of calm wash over her. A sense that whatever lay ahead, she was finally living, truly alive for the first time in years. With the data stick clutched tightly in her hand and Rachel and Akira by her side, Emma strode out into the night once more, this time, not as a prisoner of Walker's design, but as a warrior for a better tomorrow. And although she knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, uncertainty, and perhaps even heartbreak, Emma was ready to face it head-on, armed with nothing more than her own humanity and an unyielding determination to see this through to the end. With a deep breath, Emma and Rachel slipped out of their safe house in Shibuya, joining Akira on the dark streets of Tokyo. Their destination lay several blocks away, a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city where Kaito was supposed to meet them. The plan was risky but straightforward: infiltrate Walker's facility using the stolen data stick as a key to bypass security measures. With it, they hoped to locate and disable the global network supporting the consensus filter. As they walked, Emma couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something was off about Kaito. There had been moments during their last communication when his voice sounded almost rehearsed, but she pushed aside her doubts. They needed him to pull this off, and he was their only chance at gaining access to Walker's inner sanctum. At the warehouse, they found it dimly lit but empty, save for a single figure huddled in the shadows near the back wall. Emma recognized Kaito immediately, his features illuminated by the soft glow of a handheld light as he fiddled with what appeared to be a small device on a workbench. "Everything okay?" Rachel asked quietly as they approached him, her voice tinged with concern. Kaito looked up, a nervous smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I just need another minute." He glanced at Emma and then back at the tool in his hand before speaking again. "You know, it's funny, I always thought of you as this confident, unbreakable woman, but seeing your face now." His voice trailed off as he seemed to reconsider his words. Emma felt a sudden chill run down her spine. What was Kaito trying to say? That she looked broken? Vulnerable? "On myself there shouldn't be any adverse effects." He offered a grim smile. His eyes locked onto Emma's for a brief moment before looking away. "You ready for this?" Emma glanced at Rachel, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out the needle and inserted it into her arm with trembling hands. The pain was sharp but fleeting, a tiny price to pay for their chance at freedom. As soon as Kaito confirmed the implants were working properly, they set off towards Walker's research facility, now or never. The journey there felt surreal, the night air thick with tension, the neon lights of Tokyo's skyscrapers blurring into a kaleidoscope of color and sound as they made their way through crowded streets. Emma couldn't help but marvel at the contrast between this world and the numb, desolate landscape she'd inhabited just days ago. A reminder that there was still beauty to be found amidst the chaos. At last, they arrived outside Walker's imposing structure, a fortress-like complex of steel and glass surrounded by high walls and guarded gates. Kaito produced what appeared to be a remote control from his pocket and flipped it open. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he pressed several buttons in rapid succession. The main gate should unlock now. They waited in silence, watching as the heavy metal doors slowly creaked open. Beyond lay Walker's inner sanctum, the heart of his sinister operation. With bated breaths, Emma and her companions stepped across the threshold into the unknown, ready to confront whatever dangers or revelations awaited them within those hallowed halls, and finally put an end to the consensus filter that had enslaved humanity for far too long. Emma, Rachel, and Kaito moved swiftly but silently through the labyrinthine corridors of Walker's facility, a maze of sterile white laboratories and high-tech workstations humming with activity. The trio had been warned that they might encounter Walker himself or his team of engineers, but so far their luck held. No one seemed to have noticed their intrusion. "This way," Kaito whispered, leading them down a narrow side passage toward what appeared to be the facility's central hub, a large, circular room filled with banks of computer terminals and towering server racks. As they drew closer, Emma could hear the steady thrum of machinery. This was where the consensus filter's global network was housed. But just as they were about to reach their goal, a stern voice boomed from an intercom on the wall. "Code Red: Unauthorized Personnel detected in Sector 3. Security lights flickered to life, bathing the room in an eerie glow. The trio froze. Their escape route had been sealed off. "I guess we didn't plan this part out too well," Rachel said under her breath, casting a nervous glance at Kaito, who was already assessing their situation with cool calculation. "We can still make it work," he assured them, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a small device that looked like an advanced smartphone. "I have the schematics of this place memorized," Kaito explained, "and I've been preparing for contingencies." "Then what's our next move?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with urgency. "We need to get to the central server," Kaito replied, "and disable the consensus filter before it detects us. But how do we get past all these guards?" Rachel added, her eyes darting around the room. "Leave that to me," Kaito said confidently. "I have a plan for this entire place. We'll find another way." Emma felt her heart pounding in her chest as they sprinted toward the nearest lab door, anywhere to get away from Walker's guards and their deadly pursuit. But as she burst through the doorway, she was met with a sight that made her blood run cold. Standing before them was Akira, the young man who had been her guide on that fateful day when she first discovered the filter's existence. He regarded Emma with an unreadable expression, a mix of anger and sadness, as he raised a small pistol, its barrel trained squarely on her chest. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We can't let you leave here alive." Emma stared at Akira in disbelief. The man who had once seemed like a kindred spirit now turned against her. Her mind raced to comprehend the depths of Walker's manipulation, a web of deceit so vast that even those closest to its victims were ensnared. "Stop this, Akira," Rachel pleaded, stepping forward with raised hands. "We're not here to destroy the filter, just to shut it down and let humanity descend into chaos again." Akira cut her off, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. "Walker showed us a better way, a world without suffering or pain, and we chose it." Emma felt as though she'd been punched in the gut. This was not the man she thought she knew. In that moment of anguish and betrayal, something inside her snapped, the last vestiges of Walker's influence crumbling away like dust. "I won't let you do this," she said, her voice steady and firm. "We're here to end this tyranny, Akira, not perpetuate it." She reached for the pistol in his hand, determined to save him from himself if necessary. But before their hands could meet, a blinding flash of light filled the room, a warning that their time was running out. "Get down!" Kaito yelled, as an explosion rocked the labasonic boom that sent glass shards raining from the ceiling and scattered equipment flying in all directions. The three women hit the floor hard, covering their heads with their arms. When they finally looked up, Akira was gone, vanished into the chaos of Walker's research facility. "We have to keep moving," Kaito said grimly as he helped them to their feet. "This place is about to come down around our ears." He led them toward a side exit, which opened onto a dark and deserted alley, a perfect escape route. But just as they were about to make their break for freedom, a figure emerged from the shadows, an imposing man with an aura of menace that made Emma's skin crawl. "Emma Larson," he said in a voice like gravel, his eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. "I've been looking forward to this moment." He raised his hand, revealing a small device that emitted a pulsing blue light, a weapon capable of overriding the filter's control on Emma's very being. "You're Dr. Walker," she whispered, her heart sinking as she realized they had walked into a trap set by the man himself, the monster who had unleashed this nightmare upon humanity. And now, unless they found a way to disable his weapon or escape, he would erase all memory of their existence from Emma's mind, dooming them forever to a life devoid of emotion and meaning. The standoff hung in the balance of battle, not just for control, but for the very essence of human experience itself. And in that tense moment, Emma knew she had only one choice: fight back with everything she had. For her own sake, and for the sake of those who still clung to their humanity in this desolate world. Their salvation depended on her ability to resist Walker's tyranny, no matter the cost. Emma's gaze never wavered from Walker's weapon as she inched backward, her hands instinctively reaching for Rachel and Akira. The shadows concealed them, but Emma could sense their presence, a silent chorus of support against this monstrous figure. "I know you're behind this," Emma said, her voice steady despite the quaking fear within her chest. The filter wasn't just about alleviating suffering, it was a means to control people, to render us submissive to your whims. Walker's lips twisted into a sneer. "Control? No, dear Emma. It was liberation, the ultimate gift from science to humanity. And now you're going to take that gift away." She spat the words, her disgust and revulsion evident. "I'll erase you from existence if I must," Walker replied coldly. "But it's not too late for you to return. Submit to me willingly, and I might show mercy." Mercy, a concept as foreign to Emma now as joy or love. Yet she felt the fire of defiance rising within her, fueled by the memories of her brief time with Rachel and Akira, by their resilience in a world devoid of feelings. "No," she said, shaking her head vehemently. "I won't be silenced, erased from my own life. I choose to remember every moment of pain, every shred of joy, to embrace this broken, beautiful humanity, despite the darkness." Walker's eyes narrowed as he took a step closer, his weapon at the ready. "Then you leave me no choice." His finger hovered over the trigger. Emma lunged for Rachel and Akira, grabbing their hands in hers, and together they broke into a sprint, racing down the alley toward freedom. Walker's weapon fired with an ear-splitting crack, but somehow the filter protected them from its effects. Their minds remained intact, unscathed. As they burst onto a crowded street, Emma felt her world spinning out of control. Chaos erupted around her, as people, once numb and complacent under the filter's grip, now reacted to their emotions with reckless abandon. Riots engulfed city blocks, panic gripped crowds, and yet amidst this turmoil, Emma saw hope, a glimmer of humanity in its rawest form. She turned back toward Walker's facility, watching as it was besieged by protesters armed only with the weapons of truth, voices raised against tyranny, fists clenched in defiance. In the midst of the maelstrom, she spotted a familiar figure standing atop a car, his voice booming over the dinner man who had once stood on the precipice of despair and chosen to resist. "Rachel!" Emma cried out, and he looked up, his eyes locking onto hers across the sea of chaos. "Come." Together they waded into the fray, arms wrapped around each other as they moved against the tide of humanity's rediscovered emotions, their love and laughter a beacon amidst the storm. Years later, in a world rebuilt upon the ashes of tyranny, Emma stood on the steps of a new sanctuary, a place where people could come to heal, to reconnect with their feelings, and forge a future free from oppression. She looked out over the gardens of hope, seeing children laugh together beneath blooming cherry blossoms, symbols of resilience in the face of adversity. And as she turned back toward Rachel, who now stood beside her, hands entwined with hers, their love shining like a beacon, it was clear that this time there would be no filter to suppress the beauty and pain of human experience. Emma knew then that they had truly won by choosing life in all its messy, marvelous complexity. The story had come full circle. It was over at last, but the impact of their struggle would live on forever, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a people who refused to surrender their humanity. The end. Rachel's hands were warm in Emma's as they stood together, gazing out upon their new sanctuary, their haven from the darkness that had threatened to consume humanity. Around them, the lush gardens thrived, a riot of color and scent that seemed almost too vibrant after years of drabness under the consensus filter. Children played freely, shrieking with laughter as they chased each other through the cherry blossom grove. But their joy was bittersweet. Though the filter had been dismantled, its legacy remained a world forever changed by Dr. Walker's meddling with human emotions. Many still struggled to reconcile the numbness of their past lives with the overwhelming intensity of their feelings now. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience and compassion. Emma glanced down at her own hands, marveling at how she could once again feel the rough texture of Rachel's palms against hers. She traced a finger over the scars on Rachel's left hand, a constant reminder of the trials they had faced together in their fight against Walker's tyranny. It was a fight Emma would never forget, and one that had ultimately led them to this moment, standing here, in the heart of a community built upon love, acceptance, and the unbridled power of human emotion. Across the gardens, Kaito and Akira approached them, their faces etched with determination. They had spent countless hours planning for this day, a day when the sanctuary would officially open its doors to those seeking refuge from the turmoil that still raged in the outside world. Emma smiled at her friends, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Without them, she knew they never could have succeeded in their quest. Ready to welcome our first guests? Emma took a deep breath, letting it out slowly as she surveyed the grounds before her, the symbol of hope and resilience that had grown from ashes of despair. She knew the journey ahead would be long and arduous. There was no erasing the damage done by Walker's filter, but Emma was undaunted. We're ready to show them a world where they can feel again without fear of judgment or rejection. Rachel squeezed Emma's hand gently before releasing it, turning back toward their friends. Together, the four of them began walking down the path, their steps falling into an easy rhythm as they moved toward the future. The sanctuary loomed before them, its wooden gates already beginning to swing open, an invitation to those seeking solace in a world gone mad. As Emma stepped across the threshold, she felt a sense of peace settle over her, a certainty that this was where she belonged. She glanced back at Rachel, and their eyes met in a silent understanding, their bond forged in fire, now tempered by love and a shared vision for humanity's future. Inside the sanctuary, the first guests were already gathering, men and women from all walks of life who had suffered under Walker's regime. They moved hesitantly at first, unsure how to react to their newfound freedom from emotional control. But as they began to share stories, to laugh and cry together, Emma watched with a sense of wonder, their faces transforming before her eyes. This was the power of human connection, of raw emotion laid bare in all its beauty and pain. And this sanctuary would be a beacon for those seeking it, a safe haven, where hearts could heal and souls could find their way back to the authentic experience of life. As Emma turned to Rachel once more, she knew that they had truly won, not just against Walker's tyranny, but against the idea that humanity could ever be made perfect through suppression. She smiled at her love, feeling a surge of gratitude for every moment they had shared, the laughter and tears, the triumphs and defeats, all of it leading them to this place of hope and healing. And in that moment, surrounded by those who had chosen to feel again, Emma knew they were exactly where they belonged, their hearts open, their love unfiltered, and their future shining bright with promise.